Hello, everybody. Welcome to Film Family. Thanks for watching. Today, we are going to be doing our top 10 sci-fi movies of the 2010s. This is definitely the most difficult list we probably had to make. Prince and Taj had
I didn't know what qualified as sci-fi.
a lot of difficulty.
Yeah.
But I think sci-fi is definitely the most subjective and malleable genre. People have argued over. I mean, some people say Star Wars and sci-fi. It's sci-fantasy. Some people only look at sci-fi like movies about movies like Children of Men with technological developments. It's tough. So. We're all going to have actually pretty different lists. I think, our lists have been relatively similar in everything except comedy. But for this one, it's probably be pretty different. But, I just look at sci-fi as anything that takes the concept of science and puts a fictional turn on it, looks at, maybe the dangers, maybe the upsides, or whatever else. So I guess go through our honorable mentions first. Obviously, just want to say, it's our opinion, all subjective and whatnot. So, Taj, any honorable mentions?
For my honorable mentions, I had Upgrade, which I don't know if you guys even saw.
This is a sci-fi movie.
Yeah. No, I know it's that, but did you guys even see it? It's actually...
Upgrade?
Yeah, Upgrade.
Did not see it.
It actually was a surprise hit, not in terms of box office, but in terms of review. Like, a lot of people that actually saw it really enjoyed it. It was very surprising in terms of the whole storyline and everything like that, but I don't know. It was a fun time, like from beginning to end. It was kind of like what's the movie with Jason Statham? The
Transporter?
No, the one where he's on like adrenaline. Crank.
Oh.
It's like that, but it's like on. It's like that.
Crank on steroids. Is
Yeah,
like
but it
crack
has a
on
sci-fi twist to it. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah.
That's your only honorable mention?
Yeah.
I have a few honorable mentions. I'm also going to give a disclaimer. All of these honorable mentions, I don't consider them to be good movies, but they're entertaining and enjoyable, as well as the bottom half of my top 10.
Okay.
So I'm very disappointed that some of these movies are on the same list together, but it is what it is. Okay. So for the best of sci-fi, the first one I have to say is Drive Angry. It's a Nicolas Cage film. I've watched it every time it comes on TV. It's by no means is it good, but it's entertaining.
Yes.
Snowpiercer. Which I couldn't figure out how it fit on my list, but I thought it was really cool and well done. Ready Player One didn't really fit on my list either, but I liked the idea. I liked the way it was done. I thought it was a really cool movie. Edge of Tomorrow should have been on there. It really should have, but I felt like the idea was played out a little too much for me. I know it's your favorite.
Sorry.
You're a sucker for it.
Yeah.
Looper was a movie I really liked, but I didn't see too many times. Yeah, so that's why it's on my honorable mentions. John Carter was a movie I know nobody really liked. It really didn't do well, but mostly because of the marketing. Yes, it did, 2012.
I fell asleep on it 4 times.
I've seen it like 5 times in theaters, to be honest. I thought the idea was crazy. And then finally was The Meg, which I don't know if that counts as sci-fi, but it was such a good movie that it had to be on there for me.
So I have 3 movies. They're all kind of popcorn movies, but Dread, which came out in 2012. It's very dystopian. I love that movie. I couldn't do this list without putting a Star Wars movie on. So Rogue One, it made my honorable mentions. It didn't make the top 10, unfortunately. Definitely the best Star Wars movie this decade, though. And then Edge of Tomorrow as well, which it honestly could have got on my list, but I don't know if that movie is necessarily sci-fi. There's nothing really sci-fi to it except the concept. So, I don't know. Which is That was dumb. Anyway.
Starting with number 10.
Let's start with number 10. Tosh.
Yeah. So number 10 for me would have to be War for the Planet of the Apes.
Wow.
I know you guys probably think those are going to be higher for me, but and they were incredible movies. But I have to go off of what rewatchability, but also what I leave at theater, and I'm like, okay, it makes me think in that way. And the performances were incredible, the acting was incredible, but it was a very fitting ending for the trilogy, but besides, it was just more eye candy for me in that way. I mean, what they were able to do CGI and all that is like incredible, but at the same time, I'm still confident with my list. That's, you guys laugh at it. I'm still confident with what I see above it, So yeah.
My number 10, and I can't believe that this is on the same list as my number 1, is Pacific Rim. I remember when this movie came out. I enjoyed watching it in theaters. The soundtrack is awesome. Charlie Hunnam is in it. It's big, giant robots fighting giant aliens. It's a very Japanese orientated, I guess, concept, and it takes a lot of Japanese words. The second one wasn't as good, even though I still enjoyed watching it, but Pacific Rim is one of those movies I can watch over and over again. And you really want to hit something after you leave the theater. Like, you really feel like fighting. It's one of those types of movies. So it's my number 10.
Yeah, my number 10 is Real Steel, a movie that maybe...
Ooh! I was about to say, you judged me for Pacific Rim, but you put that up there? Wow.
I'm joking. I do want to say one thing. I forgot to say this when I was doing the honorable mentions. I'm speaking for Taj as well. Usually when you do top 10s, movies that don't make it. But I'm going to address one movie that didn't make either of our lists that I know everybody thinks is maybe like the greatest movie ever, which I personally strongly disagree with, which is Interstellar. Not on either of our lists. Now, I've seen the movie 2.5 times because I fell asleep the first time I saw it. I was younger. But it's a movie with some great scenes and a brilliant score that should have won the Oscar. Grand Budapest does not deserve it over Interstellar. But besides that, I think it's one of those movies that gets judged on its scenes and it's not its whole part. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about the plot holes because every movie has plot holes, but I just think as a full film, a lot of stuff doesn't work for me. I'm not sitting here to review Interstellar, but full disclosure, me and Taj both don't have it on our lists.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yes, we don't.
Yeah. So anyway, for me, number 10 is Ad Astra, which is extra funny because I just talked about Interstellar, and I know so many people probably think Interstellar is better. I'm not going to say too much about Ad Astra. I've talked about it twice. I think it's a really interesting movie. It's a really thoughtful movie. Brad Pitt's so good in it. I feel like some people said he wasn't that good, but then they liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are two different performances, but two great performances from Mr. Pitt. And this is just a really great movie. Visually, it was great. The music was really good. I just like the ambiance of it, the atmosphere, the sensoriness of it all. The design of it was really good. And, of course, the cinematography was A1. Hoyt van Hoytema. So, yeah.
Number 9.
Number 9 for me is going to be Star Wars Force Awakens. And I was debating whether I should put this on the top 10 list or not. I have to go back to when I was happy about Star Wars. I hate to say that in terms of just how I left the theater, and I did see it again right before Rise of Skywalker. What the heck was the movie called? Whatever it was.
The Last Jedi?
Yeah. No, the one before.
The last one that just came out.
The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, that was right. Okay. It's out of my memory. It re-energized my hope for Star Wars, and
they crushed it.
And, yeah, literally. But I have to go off of what I liked about this movie, and there is a lot to like about this movie for me in that way, and it did make me feel like a kid again watching the Star Wars movie. So I have to put it in the top 10. I've gone back and forth, but there it is.
One could say it gave you a new hope.
Yes. Then it crushed it, as Quinn said. Yes.
Number 9 for me was Mad Max.
Ooh, yes.
I remember I saw this. I got to see this theater, I think, at the Warner Brothers studio. And I don't remember what it was about their sound system, but it was so crisp that you could hear the difference, man. And it was... I saw the originals with, I think it's Mel Gibson in the first 2 or 3. Yeah. They're nowhere near as good, in my opinion, as this one. Obviously, it's a different time period, and they had just access to different technology. But I really like this movie because I feel like it's a dystopian potential future that actually could happen because of scarcity of water. Charlize Theron, I think, was in it, and for me, it was my first introduction to her as an actress. Okay. And I thought she did a great job in there.
Amazing, yeah.
And of course, I'm disappointed I'm forgetting my guy's name right now. Tom Hardy. Loved him with the mask on. He was just doing his stuff, and I think it's a good action movie. Yeah, fantastic.
Always covering his face.
Yeah, it's magic.
So for number 9, it's a movie that I didn't know if it was going to be on this list because... I know it's not a spoiler for my list, but its Brethren is also on this list. But I have Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the first in this trilogy, which many consider to be the weakest. I agree. But the weakest of something great is still great, and this movie is great. I think the first hour of this movie is something that I watch and say to myself, that's good, that's solid. And then the last 45 minutes are brilliant. I mean, I think the way you watch Caesar's development as a character, maybe throughout all 3 movies, it's brilliant, but just how it starts in this movie, first of all, the CGI is crazy, especially for 2011. I can't believe none of these movies won Best VFX. I really think they should have beat Interstellar in 2014 because space imagery, I don't think, is as hard as doing some of the excellent mocap, but whatever. But I think the way you see Caesar's journey and his kind of relationship with humans and how it goes from trusting to sort of reluctant to sort of saying, well, it's just not my destiny. He realizes he has a higher purpose. Obviously, he's very smart. There's so many great moments in this movie. And the movie never really feels that cliche. I think one of the reasons it's not as good as the second two is it feels just a tad bit more cliche with some of the characters. But like, you know, they have the evil businessman, but he's not that bad. He's not like annoying cliche, you know. He's just a guy. And I think the scene though, when all the apes start to escape and they just start to storm the city and fight the humans, is genuinely a breathtaking sequence. And the scene where he says like no to the guy, that felt like a moment in cinema, you know? And I feel like everybody talked about how great all three of these movies were and then never talked about it again. But these movies have always stayed on my mind. They're just fantastic. So, yeah.
Great. That was one that it went back and forth between that and War of the Planet of the Apes. Number 8 for me is definitely Source Code. I don't even know if you guys saw that.
I saw it once, but I don't remember. Is there a train in that one?
Yes, and there's a loop thing.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
And you know,
Jesus.
Hey man, I'm consistent. And the thing is that you know, the writing for me was something because I didn't see where this was gonna go, and I like Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah. Huh?
Sort of did see where it was gonna go.
You did?
Well,
no, you
because did. You halfway through it loops.
No, it loops, but as it loops, you get more and more information, and so like. Hey, there's an art to this loop thing, okay? I can tell you that. I really enjoyed this movie. I think it's one of those that you really should give it a chance to see. I always go off of how many times did I watch this movie. I watched this movie probably about 4 times, which is a lot more than I can say about some movies.
My number 8 is Chappie. Ooh, which I really like because it has the same feel as District 9, and I think it's the same director who did it. And it's unique because it's South Africa, and they're both based in South Africa, and you kind of see it in a weird way. But I felt like this movie dealt with the artificial intelligence conversation that was kind of going on, and then also this level of humanity that happened with Chappie becoming sentient and able to think for himself, and how he's being raised by bad guys, but Chappie's supposed to be doing the good guy thing. Hugh Jackman was in it, which I love to see him in there. And there was these, I guess they're pop artists who were the main characters for the bad guys, and they actually are rappers or something like that. And I really like them. In the beginning, when I first saw this, I didn't. But as I rewatched it again, I really feel like it felt the grunginess, or it matched with it.
Nice.
Yeah, so I want to preface this by saying my next 8 spots, and I know that sounds like a lot, they're all actually kind of equal. Like, seriously.
Ooh, really? Okay.
I, like... all these movies could have been number 1 at one point, so that's pretty impressive. I think it's been a solid decade for sci-fi. So, you know, if a movie that you really like is lower, just know that like they're all pretty equal. Small things. So for me, my number 8 is Inception. This is the type of high idea, intellectual but still entertaining kind of blockbuster fare that Christopher Nolan is just so much better than everybody else at delivering. It's such a fun movie, but also a movie that demands rewatches. You know, you're always rewatching and figuring out rules, and he spent so many years on the script for this movie that it, you know, if it wasn't this good, it would have been kind of a waste of time. So I'm happy that it was what it was. Leo DiCaprio is really good in this movie. Tom Hardy is probably my favorite part of this movie as Eames. He's just kind of charismatic. Joe Gordon-Levitt's really good. Marianne Cotillard. I don't know how to say her name, sorry. But she's really good in this movie. And the movie's it's entertaining to watch, but more than that, I think it's a movie that you can see a lot of the ideas of sci-fi in it. Some people have argued that it's not even a sci-fi, it's a crime movie. I definitely disagree. It's a sci-fi movie. But the way this movie handles the ideas of the complexity of layers throughout the movie, and the way that Nolan's movies usually always do that, with the idea of time and layers throughout the story and the way he structures it, it's just really fun to watch. But more than that, it's something that made me think after. Not in the way of like, oh, what was real and what was the dream? And I don't really care about that. It was more like it took me in the idea of consciousness and where their minds will go and offered with the right idea and how they place people's ideas in their heads. And it's just a really cool, high concept movie that still is able to be entertaining. This music's really solid. And it's just, I really like this movie. Plus, I want to say that there's a scene in this movie that I don't think anybody ever talks about that is like straight out of 2001: A Space Odyssey. When he sees his dad, that's like the same scene as the monolith scene. Or not, I don't know about the monolith, but you know, the scene where he sees his old self at the end of 2001. So
yeah. Number 7. Number 7 for me is Blade Runner
2049.
Yeah. Thank you for the numbers. 'Cause I was like, I'm with BG now. Like, a lot of these are interchangeable in terms of that. I'm going off of. I'll explain my top 4 when I get to it, but the visuals are incredible in this. I was very worried because I was one of those people that actually studied Blade Runner and watched Blade Runner many times, from the original cut to the director's cut to, I think there's like 2 more cuts that I've watched, and I actually don't have a favorite because they're all kind of different and have their own merits to it. But I've studied Blade Runner, and I was a little worried about this movie because I was like, okay, what are they going to do? Harrison Ford's back, and is it going to drop the ball? But it shows you what in the hands of a great director, what can happen. And this was just visually stunning, but also it kept my interest throughout this whole movie. And I don't know, it did the series justice, in my opinion. I can't really say more about it because it's not higher for that reason, in terms of it's not to the same caliber to me as Blade Runner, but it's something that I really enjoyed.
Number 7 for me is Elysium with Matt Damon.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is actually a really good Matt Damon movie. It's very similar to Chappie and the idea that the world is kind of run down and it's in the future. But I like this movie because it dealt with classism and elitism in a unique way that I had never seen before. And also, anytime you're combining, robots and humans and making a cyborg, whatever you want to call it, a bioorganic thing, I'm definitely interested in it. So I think it's a good 7.
Yes.
Yeah, so my number 7 is Her. I think this is not what all sci-fi movies should look to be, but it's what a lot of just regular movies should strive to be, because I think this is also a romance/drama. But the ideas it brings up in terms of human connection and relationships, how people communicate with each other, and just how lazy we're getting sometimes, and the fact that sometimes we really seem to be losing the value of relationships, all of the way those ideas are presented is just so well done. Spike Jonze directs this movie. I think he wrote it. I'm forgetting right now, but it's a really good script, a really good movie. Joaquin Phoenix is so good in this movie. His performance feels genuine, but also it feels like something that I can relate to. And, and I'm not his character's age or, same person or anything, but he just feels like a relatable guy. And I don't really often feel that way for a movie character. Scarlett Johansson's really good, even if she's just, a faceless voice. And I just think some of the ideas brought up in this movie are so compelling. The movie, I think, is going to be a lot of people are going to try to replicate this movie because the movie has really realistic dialogue. It's got that genuine emotion. It's got that genuine emotional complexity that so many movies just try to show but lack the ability to, because I think when you're showing a movie that really breaks down the emotional spectrum and all of its complexities, and it is complex for humans, it's just never going to be easy to show that. And the way this movie does it is going to be great. And a lot of movies are going to try to copy it, but this is a great movie for me, so I feel comfortable with this at this place.
Nice. Okay. Number 6 for me is Ex Machina.
Wow, that's pretty low for that.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah. Only because I was more impressed when I saw this movie. I mean, obviously the performances, Oscar Isaac and Donald Gleason. Sorry, and the directing and writing of it's Alex
Garland.
Was, I guess, the best parts of it. But for me, I was more fascinated with the relationship between AI and the character. And so it was just a good movie. But I think one of the problems I had with it is that I watched it 2 or 3 times. And it's not that it didn't hold up, but once that the mystery is not there anymore in terms of what's going to happen, I had to go off of just the performances and stuff like that, and they were great. But it's just it's a great sci-fi movie, but it honestly felt like I'm probably gonna get in trouble for that, like a Netflix movie at the end of the day. I've seen Netflix movies that are like that in that way, but it was with great actors.
Okay. I mean, my number 6 is I was actually a little late to watch this. Was Annihilation with Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an interesting combination because it had this weird type of Interstellar Ad Astra vibe mixed in with a war movie vibe, mixed in with an alien. It was kind of all over the place, and the reason why it's on here mostly is because of its visual representation. I just thought that the dust and the particles and the way they filmed it was very artsy, and it was very pleasing to watch. They had really nice colors, especially at the end. And I really like the music of this. I think Natalie Portman did a good job acting in it. And it's not in my top 5, but it's definitely a number 6 for its rewatchable.
Isn't it? That did
Alex Garland.
Yeah.
So number 6, I have Looper. This is just one of the most all-around entertaining movies probably of this decade for me. I love the way this movie is directed, written, choreographed, edited, everything, shot, everything about this movie, just awesome. It was one of those movie experiences where I watched it super recently because I had never seen it, and I was sitting there just watching it like, wow, this is a great film, and like, it really made me want to be like, rewatch Last Jedi and Knives Out. Now, don't like those movies very much. Yeah. Obviously, like, I don't hate Knives Out. I don't even think Last Jedi is a terrible film. It's a bad Star Wars movie. But, I mean, seriously, this movie impressed me. I think it's by far the best thing the dude's done because TV episodes aren't the same when you're not writing them. And I think the screenplay he pens for this movie is fantastic. It never feels like it's trying too hard to be like, whoa, sci-fi blockbuster concept, you know, here's what's going on, here's your gimmick. It feels like it always is natural in the movie. And more than that, it really never feels like it's forcing down plot points or trying to overly give too much exposition, because I think a lot of sci-fi movies they're scared of their audience either saying that there's plot holes or just being confused in general. So they just kind of put too much expository dialogue, and then your film just becomes uninteresting. This movie never has that for me. It's constantly interesting the whole time. The kid's a really good actor, and actually, it's one of the best child performances I've ever seen, seriously. And Joe Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis are both really good. I think, too, it's interesting that when you see so many movies, like, you know, this is a popular example, but X-Men Days of Future Past, when you see the two characters at different ages, they communicate. Usually they'll have two characters do banter, or they'll have a dramatic moment like that movie. Or, you know, they'll be like, I used to look like that. You know, it's just cliche stuff. But in this movie, they hate each other because sometimes you hate where you used to be or where you're going to become, you know, because you have an idea of yourself at any given point in your life and what that is, what that means to other people, and what that will become or what it was. And so when you see a different version of that, you kind of hate it. And I really like the way this movie represented that idea. The world is really cool. Again, it's never like putting too much on the visuals or exposition. It's just showing and not telling. And I just really like the shots in this movie. The action's great. This is one of the most just entertaining movies. And I love the editing in this movie, too.
Nice. Well, that was my number 5, was Looper. And you know it had to be very...
Because it does the whole loop back thing.
That was one of the reasons. But the other reason, I mean, yeah, it's a Rian Johnson movie. And, you know, it had to be good for me to put it in my top 5 for, you know, how I'm feeling now about the whole scenario. But I remember watching this in the theater, and I went back to go see it again, just because, yes, the performances were great, but you really didn't know what was going to happen in that movie. And I really enjoyed it. I love, like, in general, those kind of mystery-ish kind of things. But then the whole time loop, yes, it got me. But it was just brilliantly crafted, and you can see the strength of Rian Johnson's directing and his writing in it. And I think that's the most important thing. That's what gave me so much high hopes for Last Jedi, was because I was like, and I had seen Brick too. I had seen that. I went and saw Brick after I saw Looper, because I was like, okay, I'm a Rian Johnson fan. And then I saw the Breaking Bad episode. I'm like, I'm a real Rian Johnson fan. And then I saw Last Jedi, and that's it. And end of story.
This is where my movies, I feel like they start to get better. And yeah, this is so as far as sci-fi, but I had a hard time with 5 and 4. So my 5 is Inception. And I really like Christopher Nolan as a director. I like the color palette he uses. And for Inception, I think just from a technical standpoint, the way they were able to achieve some of these shots and the level of complexity that came from the storytelling, just making sure you keep track of what's going on with what, it was very complex for me. The reason why it's not higher than my 4 is because of rewatchability. Okay. And that's what the leading factor was. It's not an easy movie to follow. You have to be very alert and aware, paying attention. But it's visually pleasing. The music or the sound design for it I really liked. And Leo's a gem.
Yeah, all 5 of these movies that I have next up really deserve the number 1 spot. I genuinely mean that. They're all incredible films. So, number 5, I have Ex Machina. Again, this is another movie I saw pretty recently. I hadn't seen before because I wanted to prepare for this list, and I was blown away. I'd say the base amount about this movie, I knew it was about AI, and that's kind of all I knew. But, man, was I impressed. The script for this movie was excellent, and I mean excellent. This is one of those movies that has a dialogue with its audience, which is obviously one way because, the characters are reacting to what's on the script, not what you're saying to it. But it feels like you're almost talking to the movie because the movie's constantly telling you, think about this and what's your opinion. And it never feels like it's just sticking to something. It's always asking the viewer, do better, challenge yourself, think about existence, think about relationships, what's the human goal, what's the human connection, and all that stuff constantly have me thinking. I've had very few movies that have really jogged my brain as much as this. I was thinking about some of the analytical things talked about in this movie, some of the creative things, and it all just was fantastic. Plus, the acting is really good, obviously. But more than that, the movie's kind of claustrophobic sometimes. The dance scene is pretty great. I think it'll be one of those scenes that's remembered most from the movie because it's so much different from the rest of the movie, especially where it's put in. It's almost like surreal in a sense. But besides that, like, everything's fantastic. The script is really, like, all right. I haven't seen, I think, Spotlight, which won Best Original Screenplay, but this movie might... This is a good script. It really always made me think about things. And is AI really, inevitable? Are we going to do anything about this? What does make us human? Because we always like to talk about the human traits and what makes you special. But is there anything at all? Can the AI have it? And it's all so great. And it's so well executed, so well directed. I actually really like the look of this movie, too. The VFX are off the charts. Incredible. Everything about this film is fantastic. It's creative. It's engaging. It's enthralling. The mystery in it's fun. I love this film.
Nice. My number 4 is Edge of Tomorrow. I know that you guys have already mentioned it.
For obvious reasons.
And throw Tom Cruise in. I've said this movie enough. You guys really need to see this movie. For me, at least. Let me know if I'm, crazy or whatever. But I just really enjoyed this movie.
It's definitely a good movie.
And
I like it.
And Doug Liman directs it, and it's just, I don't know. There's something about this movie. It hit everything that I needed.
Number 4 for me is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I agree, Rise I think is really good, but the reason why it's higher than Inception for me is because of the rewatchability. But also, I remember watching the first Planet of the Apes from I don't know when it came out. Yeah, so bad. Okay, and for a movie like this to come out, I was worried. There's no way you can make a story like this really cool. And as you were talking about the character arc from Caesar in Rise, I like how this takes part after that at Dawn, and then it moves into War. Even though I think the second one may be their strongest in my opinion, and it's the most entertaining for me to watch.
Well, we have something in common because I also have Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Nice.
I think this film is everything you need to do in a sequel. You continue what's going on with the characters. You continue the ideas while introduce something new. You don't try to top what you did before, but you do something that feels like a natural extension of your plot. So if it's a smaller scale thing, do it smaller. If it's bigger, then do it bigger. And this film feels like a perfect sequel, and I mean that. I feel like sometimes this film gets a little undervalued. Not that people don't say it's great. People say that all 3 of these movies are great, but then they just kind of forget about it, and then they go back to talking about Dark Knight and Empire Strikes Back and T2. But I think this movie's on that type of filmmaking, and I seriously think this is brilliant. What they do with Caesar's character in this movie, the idea of just human connection, and then the fact that they never really vilified the humans in this movie, but you don't really like the humans in this movie, especially the one guy who shoots the ape at the beginning, and then he says he's like, oh, you think I'm a bad guy for this? And then you think about it, you're like, I mean, I'm a human, and I would probably feel the same way too. Of course, I'd be frightened if a hyper-intelligent species started taking over, especially when I was younger. I used to look at them like apes, and it just shows how nuanced some of the ideas can be in when just talking about relationships and how you think of creatures and existentialism, and it's all brilliant to me. This movie, like Ex Machina, does what great sci-fi does. It makes you think while also offering something entertaining. The action sequence in this movie is great. An iconic image of this film decade will be Koba riding with the 2 machine guns on the horse through the fire. It feels iconic when you watch it. The character of Koba, I used to hate him because I used to be like, he's the villain. He kills humans. Yeah. But when you watch him more, you really do like Koba. Not necessarily because he's charismatic, because he doesn't really speak English, obviously. Or he does, but obviously not to the level of a human. But the way that you can see the frustration, true hatred he has, and his lack of ability to let go of what happened with the humans. And there's a great scene where Caesar's like, we let humans work, and he's like, this is human work. He's showing all his scars, and it's just brilliant stuff. The movie's also gorgeous. I love the look of it. The aspect ratio is actually different from the other 2 movies. I don't know if it was shot on something different, but it's gorgeous. The script is amazing. The performances are all really good. Gary Oldman's solid in it. The action's incredible, and it just feels like a perfect sequel. I wish I could talk about this movie forever because everything about it makes me think and entertain and enthralled. It's a perfect sci-fi movie.
I was laughing because as you were saying that, I was like, it sounds like my movie, my number 3, which you guys probably will laugh at, but it's Bumblebee.
Oh my God!
Bumblebee for me was everything you just said. Perfect sci-fi movie, a perfect.
You like it though because they did the original Bumblebee for this one.
I like
Full
it
disclosure, Taj hates 1 through 5 Michael Bay movies.
I despise them. It's not Star Wars. It's not Transformers for me. See, it's already got me rattled up. Bumblebee is what happens when you write a love letter to the fans, and Travis Knight did that.
And they put John Cena in it.
It doesn't matter.
Come on.
When that can survive that and still be a good movie, that shows you something. Here's the thing why it's a great movie. It's a great movie because it actually has heart. It's not it knew it didn't have the budget to be bigger than any Michael Bay movie. So what did it do? It concentrated on being meaningful, like an E.T. kind of our generation. And I know that's
I feel like you failed at that, but we'll let you continue.
You guys can laugh all you want. This movie for me, Haley Steinfeld was great in it. I just really enjoyed this movie, and I don't know. It's one of those movies that I definitely bought. I definitely watched 3 times in the theater, and I have no shame saying that I love Bumblebee. And I know there's some people over there that will, in the comments, that will write the same thing. And I don't know. It's just it's sung to me, and I hope they continue. I hope they continue down this path.
Wow. I understand why though, because I mean I guess it is more on like the traditional path of Transformers.
That first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of Cybertron that they gave
that was really cool.
That was incredible, and that showed you what they could do. And
John Cena definitely devalued it though a little bit. But my number 3 is Ex Machina.
Ooh, okay.
I'm not gonna add on to what everybody else said about it, but I like this movie because I think their location helped a lot. Mm-hmm. Visually, the house was very stunning, very pleasing. Yeah. I really like the idea that they incorporated a lot of stuff, like for example, the Turing test to see if the AI is truly AI and how they interact with that, and then they showed the relationship kind of develop between them, and then the plot twist kind of at the end. It was it's such an interesting movie, but the thing that really got is I love the cinematography of it and the way the camera moves and the shots that they decided to frame in. Yeah, I think it really helps tell the story. Nice. So it's my number 3.
Perfect.
So my number 3 is again a movie that could really be number 1, but it just had to be number 3. It was Arrival, Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. This is one of his 4 out of his, I guess what I would call main movies. I mean, I guess 5 if you count Enemy. I know a lot of people don't, but without Roger Deakins, and it's still gorgeous. So it shows that he has a visual style and he knows what he wants. But more than that, it shows his extremely incredible ability to make sci-fi concepts palatable. Some of the ideas of this movie about language. This movie, I want to say that this movie had such a tough job at interesting audiences in language. It's something that a lot of people are like, I don't even care. I speak language, People think of language as a second thing, but you forgot that you came into this world not knowing that, or I guess some people don't believe that, but, most people would agree with that. And I think the way this movie handles the idea of language communication between species, between people, it's just brilliant. And it really made me just engage the whole time. The music's also really good. I know not all of it's like an original score, but it was really good. And the non-original stuff was fantastic. Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner are both really good. I just love watching them communicate, understanding, because we all forget that there was a point in our lives where we really struggled to articulate a full sentence because we're trying to just string these things together that other people have deemed valuable or worthy of being said, and that they've said, oh, well, this is what this denotes and this is what that means, and then you say it in this way and it means this. And to watch adults in this movie try to figure that out, and then you watch a movie that has this kind of crazy twist that has this constant tension ramping up about the relationship with the governments and if they're going to have to fight the aliens, sort of Close Encounter-esque. Mm-hmm. It's all just so fantastic. And Denis Villeneuve, that guy's excellent. And I really think that he's shown that he knows how to take everybody on his movie, whoever it is, and they know how to make a cohesive idea, something that works, and they all agree on that. And that's something I love about this film. So it's incredible.
Nice. My number 2 is Inception, and I'll never forget that experience of watching it in the theater. And usually movies that go over my head, like I don't really like in that way if I have to think about it too much. But there's something about Christopher Nolan, it intrigued me just enough to kind of want to go back and see it another time and another time. you throw Leo in there, and it's like a no-brainer for me. And visually, it's just stunning. But also, I'm fascinated with dreams and that kind of whole idea of what can be accomplished in dreams and stuff like that. And so I really love the script, but I also love the performances in them. And I don't know, Inception it was fluctuating between number 1 and number 2 for me, but at the same time, it's just I'm pretty confident. I'm laughing as I say I'm pretty confident in my number 1. You guys will probably laugh at it, or maybe not. But yeah, my number 1 is I have a stronger reason why it's number 1.
My number 2 is Prometheus. I love Ridley Scott. Yes. I feel like all the projects fantastic, but I'm a fan of Aliens, and I feel that Prometheus isn't necessarily a direct prequel to Aliens, even though the ending shows that it is. But I feel like this movie is a more entertaining, more of a dumbed down version of Interstellar and Ad Astra, because it kind of deals with the same topics, but it does it in an action way. The cast is fantastic. I don't know all of their names, but the main one I remember is the female lead, the doctor in that, and I think that she did a really good job with a wide variety of emotions. And I felt that the CGI and the expanse of the worlds that they were trying to show were very pleasing to watch.
Nice. Yeah, so I have War for the Planet of the Apes. It was really difficult for me to decide which one I like more between War and Dawn, because I think they're both brilliant films. And I think in terms of what's more rewatchable, I give it to Dawn. It's a little shorter, and it's just got a little more of an action movie factor to it. But I was thinking about the fact that War for the Planet of the Apes is one of the most brilliant movies I think I've ever seen, seriously. I remember I was actually a big fan of the first two, and I was excited to see this movie. And, I didn't necessarily expect a movie that would spend so much of its runtime challenging its audience to ask questions about your relationship with other creatures, your duty and destiny as humans, and things like that. And I was not too old, or I wasn't too young, but I was young enough to be like, I don't know if I get this yet. And rewatching it this time, even if some of it is not as quite as fun or interesting as the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and also I think Bad Ape, the character in this movie, has a little bit too much comedy. But besides that, I really think this is a perfect film. What they do with Caesar's character is fantastic. You feel his loss at the beginning of the movie. There's a little shot of him, his eyes or his face, and then you see the general played by Woody Harrelson after his family's dead. It's all fantastic. The action in this movie is excellent. Matt Reeves does a great job at coming back. The script is excellent. I really, really, really love the choice for this movie to not make it a huge war, even if it's in the title, because not all wars were just fought with guns and violence. Some wars are fought, before any guns are started firing, and then once it's over like that, and that's what this movie shows. And then you see the humans are still fighting each other because they have found a way to kind of agree on something, and it's just a problem with humanity. And again, this movie doesn't try to just vilify the humans. It's nuanced. You really do hate Woody Harrelson, and then when he talks about the fact that he lost his son and soldiers, you kind of say, well, I don't know if I wouldn't do that. And so it's just a movie that I love watching. The cinematography is excellent, just as the first two. And then something I love about this movie is the donkeys, who are the apes that go to the human side. And the main donkey, I don't think they have names, they just call him Donkey. But his little character arc, because you hate him, because you feel like you betrayed your own species, and you really do hate him. And by the end of the movie, where he has this big heroic moment, even if it doesn't last long, it's just something compelling to watch. And I really think, and I mean this seriously, Caesar's character arc and journey throughout these three films is one of the greatest ever put to screen. It's a truly brilliant trilogy. The way it handles the idea of just people existing together, can peace ever truly last? I mean, wow, I love this film. It's excellent. And the action sequences are very good.
Nice. Cool. My number 1 movie is Gravity. It's something that I saw in the theater, and I didn't know what I was seeing in terms of just visually. It was stunning. And I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot of space movies, and to still surprise me in terms of the visuals. You mentioned cinematography for the last movie that you just mentioned, but it's like this, was just stunning cinematography. It was... If you would have told me the premise of this movie in terms of what I'm going to be doing for, I guess, the runtime of it, I would have said this is going to be the most boring movie ever. But somehow Sandra Bullock pulls it off, and you go down this journey with her, and you root for her. And I think it's just a command performance, a command directing, command cinematography. And this movie really invoked what I want to be as a director in terms of just having that kind of command.
It's funny you say that because I would almost use that as a transition to my number one, which is Interstellar, which is on one of you guys' list. Yeah. But I feel like this movie is the classical music of movies because it definitely it's artsy. It requires, I think, a higher level of attention and intellect to really understand it. And some people just don't get it. That's not insulting to your intelligence. It just speaks to a certain type of people, and I'm one of those people that it speaks to. It's poetic. It's introspective. Matthew McConaughey, I felt like he did a great job. I'm not going to say it's one of his best performances, but I'm really happy he was a part of this. Most of the cast, actually, I think they did it perfectly. And this isn't a movie that I feel like I can rewatch multiple times, but every time that I have rewatched it, I've found something new that I liked about the film. And it could have been a shot, it could have been a scene, it could have been a whole sequence, but there's something new that I really liked about this. So that's why it's my number one.
Cool. Yeah, so it was so hard for me because I love the Planet of the Apes movies, I love Arrival, I love Ex Machina, and I was like, I want to put all four of those in number one. And my number one, Blade Runner 2049, just edged them out by a little bit because this is what I would call the perfect sci-fi movie. I mean, it's got that high concept ideas, but also being visually and narratively compelling. The acting's all really good. The action sequences, though there are not many of them, are really well filmed and just really compelling to watch. The cinematography for this movie, like, I don't even know if there's something I could say that's appropriate to just describe how excellent it is. It deserves like 3 Oscars, but I mean, the VFX, the way this movie creates its world, and then slowly builds on the idea of memory, which is definitely something that has been brought up in the sci-fi movies before. I mean, Inception had that. And the way it builds on that, the way it introduces Harrison Ford as Deckard, who actually does a really good job for a guy who's been pretty famous for phoning it in sometimes this decade. Harrison Ford's really good. Yeah, and
he knows better.
I mean, Ryan Gosling was really good. Jared Leto was actually really good. He was kind of creepy in this movie, but I really liked him as a villain. Yeah. You kind of were disgusted by him, he has no empathy, and the way he played it was really well done. Anna de Armas was really good as like the, I don't know what to call hologram, or the AI kind of person, the people you buy. But the way this movie shows the industrialization of LA and the way it just shows how different everything looks, how people act. The sound design of this movie also, I forgot, oh my God, the sound design is ridiculous. If you watch this at home, turn it up all the way. You'll have yourself a nice experience. And, I mean, the score by Hans Zimmer, and I forgot the other person who did it, sorry, but this is exactly what sci-fi should be. It should be challenging everything you think about, but it should also be entertaining and showing you something that you've never seen before. That's exactly what I think sci-fi should be, and I think this movie, along with Blade Runner, is probably the greatest sci-fi 1-2 punch besides Alien and Aliens and the first 2 Terminators. And A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. But that has a 3rd movie, so I don't know if that counts. But yeah, I really think this is a great film. It does everything a sequel should. It builds up on the second one with the never feeling like it's trying to replicate or copy it. It's visually fantastic. The writing's great. And I just think this is a pretty much perfect film. So, cool. Yeah, so those are our lists for the best sci-fi movies of the decade. If you have your own list, let us know down below. Let us know what you think of our list. Of course, they're just our opinions and our favorites. And if you have a favorite of our list, let us know which one. And
Interstellar.
like and subscribe. And thanks for watching. We will see you next time.